So far in this video series, we've learned about the architecture of the pipe organ, the layout of the console, and a number of devices found on a typical organ console. We've learned about pipes and the families of tone color and the varieties of pitch. And we've also learned that all organs are unique, one-of-a-kind instruments. Now we're going to concentrate on you as a new organist, and what will probably be one of the most, if not the most important function you perform as a church musician and a church organist, and that is being a strong leader of hymns in hymn playing. To begin, let's look at a hymn from a typical hymnal. I've chosen one written in the late 19th century, and the hymn tune name is Morecambe. And that is a resort town, a coastal resort in the United Kingdom. A lot of times hymn tunes are named for the places where they were composed. Now, in this hymn, we have four parts: soprano and alto in the top hand or the right hand, and the bass and tenor in the left. A pianist would look at this and say, you know, this looks like piano music only with texts stuck in the middle. But it's not so. This is really choral music, and we must think of all hymns as being choral music. As an organist, you're going to adapt every hymn to the organ by assigning different voices in different places. Most obviously, you're going to take the bass line and put it in the pedals. You're going to take the tenor, alto, and soprano, and while you may play those on one manual, there are some times when you'll place the soprano line on its own manual or thicken or thin out the texture depending on the texture you want to create. Every time you play a hymn on the organ, you are making an arrangement of it on the spot. It's a mental process. Let's take a look at a series of illustrations which shows us how we get from here to putting that hymn at the organ. And the first step is to take the tenor and bass voices and divide them so that the tenor voice is on the bass clef of the manuals and the pedal takes the bass voice in its own pedal staff. Take a look. Here we have the soprano and alto voice just as they were in the hymnal, all the way through. But the two voices that had been on the bass clef staff of the hymnal are now divided into these two staves, the bass clef in the manuals and the bass clef in the pedals. We should think about how we're going to play the pedals on this hymn. And so in this next example, I have actually written in those pedal symbols. You'll remember that from an earlier lesson, we have toes indicated with the pointy inverted V, and we have the heels indicated with a U. And above the pedal note is the right foot, heel or toe, and below the note, the left foot. So here's the pedaling written in. And we're going to play now, as our next step, the pedal line by itself, and then we're going to add in, with the pedal, the tenor line. We're not going to play the upper two voices on the treble clef staff here, just these two staves together. Now that we've played the tenor and bass voice with the tenor in the left hand and the bass in the pedals, if we play the entire hymn and play it just as written with repeated notes where they occur in all voices, you're going to notice that it's a bit choppy. And that's not too musical. It's also not very supportive for the congregation. What we need to do is to tie certain repeated notes to smooth it a bit and to be less choppy and more supportive of singing. Now, in this example, I've decided to tie together certain repeated notes. You'll notice that I never tie two repeated notes together when they appear in the melody or the soprano voice. Never do that. But when you have repeated notes in the alto, tenor, or bass voice, it is certainly possible, and it helps to smooth things over and to be less choppy if you tie the repeated notes together. You can choose which ones to tie. You do not need to tie all of the notes, for that would be too smooth. So what we need to do is to tie together, at your discretion, certain of the alto, tenor, and bass in order to make the experience more supportive and smooth. Okay, so we've tied together the repeated notes and the lower voices, alto, tenor, and bass, to help make the hymn less choppy at the organ. There's one more thing we can do to make the expression of this hymn more musical at the organ, and that would be by making small crescendo and decrescendo movements with the swell box in the hymn. As you'll see, I've indicated here hairpin crescendo and decrescendo marks. And these are placed in a way that will help support the congregational singing. For example, at the end of the first phrase, we're on a rather low note, and then the next phrase begins with a much higher pitch. A congregation will appreciate having the organ more supportive during that last note of the first phrase leading into the second, and that's why I've indicated a crescendo there. As the phrase comes to the end, the range comes lower. I close the box because the congregation doesn't need that much support there. And likewise, as the line ascends again in pitch, the voice normally gets louder. You need to give more support to the congregation, it opens again. And then at the very end, I taper the box down because we are at a rather lower pitch again as the hymn ends. Now you're probably going to wonder, how long is it going to take me to learn all this? Well, it depends. You could take these and apply them and master them in any range of times depending on who you are and how much you practice. It could take you only like 9 hours or 9 days, 9 weeks or 9 months, hopefully not 9 years. But it may take you many months to master this. And one of the things that is helpful at the beginning is to maintain, like I have illustrated here, an arrangement that is written in organ score style. You sort of create your own hymnal, so to speak. Each time you get a hymn, you can write it out and illustrate for yourself and make it clear in your own mind exactly what you're going to do. This might help you to master these techniques quicker and with more surety.